So there's this stereotype that goes around people who don't use Linux, and basically what they're saying is that if you need to do real work, you can't do that on Linux. And they've generalized this to the point where you hear it all the time. You can't use Linux to do real work. It's just a hobby. It's all for tinkers. It's for developers. It's for nerds. I mean, I'm maybe not helping the point by wearing this hat, which you can get at shop@thelinuxcast.org, but I call this stereotype nonsense. Now, let's get the caveats out of the way, because there are some caveats where this stereotype is true. Most stereotypes are somewhat true, whether you like them or not, but they're usually overblown. That's the reason why people make fun of them often. So, like all stereotypes, this one has some level of truth in it for certain types of workflows. People who use AutoCAD, for example, or are deep in the Adobe ecosystem. If that's how you do your work, this stereotype is true for you. You can't do real work on Linux. And unfortunately, Linux fanboys, that's just the way that it is. Now, if you work and struggle, you probably can do some of that type of stuff on Linux, but your workflow is going to have to change because a lot of the programs that you use on Windows and Mac isn't here on Linux. So if you can find alternatives, maybe you can be successful. If you can't find alternatives and get used to those alternatives, you're stuck where you're at. But outside of those two workflows, the vast majority of the rest of us who probably do real work can in fact use Linux in order to do our work. So just a real brief rant from your friendly ranter. I'm going to talk a little bit about this. So I do real work on Linux. Now, do I use very many application specific workflows? No, not really. I spend most of my time in a text editor. And I don't know about you guys, but you can use a text editor on pretty much any operating system. I can use Vim on Windows if I really wanted to. Just seems stupid, but you could do that if you wanted to. I could do that if I wanted to, but I wouldn't do that because I prefer Linux. So I'm not what you consider like a power user of applications when it comes to my actual job. I'm an editor. That's what I do for a living nowadays. I used to be a writer, and the tools there are basically the same. I spend my time in a text editor, and then I transfer everything over to Google Docs, which works on any operating system. So I'm not what you would call, like I said, someone who needs very specific applications to do powerful work. But I do what I consider real work. I make a decent living on my computer doing stuff. And I think that qualifies. I know other people who do development, for example. You can basically do any type of development on Linux that you can do on Windows or Mac. A few exceptions that mostly dovetail around the whole Mac thing, but basically everything else you can do right here. And that's great. You want to do web development, you can do that just as well on Linux as you can do on Windows or Mac. If you want to do Rust development, you can do that better on Linux, I think, than you can do it on Windows or Mac. If you want to do C or whatever, you name the programming language, chances are you can do it just as well here on Linux as you can on Windows or Mac. Again, there are some exceptions, specifically when you're coding for those platforms themselves. Those tend to work better if you're coding on those platforms, but everything else works just as well here on Linux. Things like content creation is not what some people call a real job, but a lot of people do make quite a bit of money in terms of making content for the internet, and you can do that just as well here on good old Linux as you can on Windows or Mac. You can have a camera of any kind that you want hooked up. You can have all of your fancy audio equipment if you want all hooked up. And you can use open source applications. Most of them are the exact same you'd use on Windows or Mac. Things like OBS and Audacity. Those things are available on Mac and Windows. That's exactly what I'm using right now to record this video. So if you are a content creator like that, or if you're a blogger or whatever, if you're a TikToker, if you use a computer for TikToking, I don't know. I'm old. I don't know what the TikTokers do, whatever. But anyways, you can create a lot of content on Linux without having to have a PC or Mac around. So that's another profession where you can just kind of use. And I don't need to go through all the professions. So I just named a few of them. And maybe you're looking at this and saying, well, those are all the frilly professions, content creator, editor, developer. You named 3 things that are all set for just working at the computer. Well, all those other ones are just working at the computer too. So yeah, I only named 3 of them, but there are a ton of people out there who do actual work in other professions that use Linux as their daily driver just fine. This whole stereotype is something that has permeated everywhere. Like, so much so that if you are in corporate America, you've probably heard this before, especially if you're like a Linux person in corporate America and you've maybe mentioned, hey, could you, maybe use Linux on our workstations or whatever? Someone's going to say, well, you can't actually do what we do on Linux, which is mostly utter nonsense. Chances are they could do exactly what they do because a lot of, and yes, there's a lot of specific specialty tools that are written just for Windows. So maybe that's a hurdle, but for the vast majority of people's workflows, probably you could use Linux. And if they put in some effort into, moving over, it'd be even easier because a lot of those tools are still running on IE6 or something, and it'd be good for them to be rewritten anyways. That's just probably an extreme example, but you know that it's probably true. So this stereotype has, like I said, permeated amongst everyone who doesn't use Linux. They all think this. And the question I have is, how do we prove them wrong without something miraculous happening? And I don't know that that's something that we can do. We can, because people are going to look at the examples that I gave, just the 3 minuscule examples, and just say something like, other than developer, the other 2 examples you gave are not real work. They'll say, editing can be done on any operating system, therefore it's not a good example. Content creation can be done on any platform, therefore it's not a good example. What does Linux, in fact, do that's better than the other ones? Which is not the question at all. We can have that debate some other time, but most people, when they think about this whole stereotype, aren't thinking that Linux is going to do something better or Windows does something better. They think Linux can't do it at all, which is where I'm finding the point of contention. It can, in fact, do the vast majority of things, is the point. And it bugs me when people say that it can't. And it bugs me even more, and I guess this is where the whole rant part comes in, is that people say that Linux is a hobby. Now, Linux can be a hobby, that's for damn sure. I would consider there are some elements of my workflow that are very hobbyish, for sure. I like to theme my window manager. So sue me. But I also do real work. Something can be a hobby and also be functional and have the ability to be used productively. I think that that's the case with Linux. It can be both. And I think that it's more functional than it is hobby, because now I have a audience of about 63,000 people who watch my videos. Those are my subscribers. And while not everyone obviously watches every single video, they've obviously all watched at least one video. And while I haven't done any scientific research here, I will say that the vast majority of them aren't using Linux as a hobby. They're using it as a tool. Most of them have just installed a distro on their old laptop and they use it for browsing the web or checking their email or whatever. They're not out there starting home labs. They're not out there doing bash scripting, what have you. They're not doing any of the nerdy stuff that some of us do. They're just using it as a tool, just like you would use Windows or Mac. And that's the vast majority of Linux users. They're using it as a tool. They're doing whatever it is that they do, and then they move on with their day. They're not spending their hours messing around with Waybar or Polybar or i3 or whatever in order to make it the coolish, radish config so they can share it on Unix porn. Unix porn has given such a bad name. It's a bad reputation. It's a bad rap because everyone looks at Unix porn and is like, oh my god, that's all they're spending their time doing. And I'm 100% guilty of this. I have spent hours and hours on end customizing my window managers, making videos about it, making speed runs and time lapses of me doing this stuff. I like doing that kind of stuff, and I'm not going to stop. So, and I guess in that case, that is a hobby, but I also use it productively. So I think that people look at, things like ricing and stuff and think that that's the reason why Linux is considered just a hobby and not an actual productive thing. And that's disappointing because, as I said, Linux is just as productive as Windows or Macintosh, and I would fight anyone who says otherwise. Now, are they going to be able to come back with some heavy hitters like AutoCAD and Adobe? Yes, but the vast majority of everything else I have arguments for. So there you go. A little bit of a rant today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have thoughts on this, you can leave those in the comment section below. If you haven't already, leave a thumbs up on this video. I'd really appreciate it. It'd really help the channel. As Mental Outlaw would say, it helps hack the algorithm and gets people to actually see my content, which I'd really appreciate. And if you haven't, hit the subscribe button yet. please do so. I really, really appreciate it. I make Linux type content, not all of it ranting, but I do a lot of ranting, but I do a lot of Linuxy stuff. So if you like that kind of thing, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notification icon so you can be alerted every time that I do upload content, and you won't miss out any of this very nice content. I promise you'll never be disappointed. And if you are disappointed and I broke my promise, you can always just unsubscribe and go watch DistroTube, because he's much better than I am, and he has hair. Wait a minute, I have hair. He doesn't have hair. I don't know where I went there. I just got a haircut, so I assumed that I didn't have hair there for a second. I hid it underneath the hat, which you can get at shop.thelinuxcast.org. If I didn't mention that earlier. So, there you go. Anyways, you can support me on Patreon at patreon.com/linuxcast, or you can support me on YouTube, Ko-fi, or Liberapay. Those links will be in the video description. Thanks to everybody who does support me on Patreon and YouTube. You guys are all absolutely amazing. Without you, the channel just would not be anywhere near where it is right now. So, thank you so very, very much for your support. I truly, guys, I know the economy is, what do you call it, shit these days. I completely understand that. So, if you support me in any way, whether it's on Patreon or through the shop or whatever, I really truly do appreciate it. So thank you so very much from the bottom of my heart. Even if it's just a couple bucks you throw my way, I promise you it goes to good use. I usually use it to buy a new keyboard. I'm just kidding. It pays the bills. But anyways, thanks everybody for your support. If you want to get one of these fancy snatchy hats or a cup or a hoodie or a shirt or something like that, you can head over to shop.thelinuxcast.org. There you'll find all of these awesome, really cool hats. And unfortunately, you cannot be a Linux nerd without a Linux nerd hat. And that's just the rules. I didn't make them. I did actually make that one up, but whatever. Anyways, thanks for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day. I'll see you next time.